Good morning, everyone, wherever you are joining from in Australia. I welcome you to today's 3CX basic training, the first one that we do for the new version 20. I am Remo. You see my history on the screen. I've worked previously in Europe for a couple of decades. Then I moved over to Australia. A lot of people ask me why. Simply my wife is from here. So I worked 6 years at Alloy. People who know me from the trainings that I did at Alloy, they know what they can expect, positive or negative, don't know. Then after what happened a year ago with Alloy, I moved to Atrox for 11 months, and then I got hijacked by Leader in the change of staff we had when Scott left Leader, and I more or less was asked to take over his position. I would like to do a little bit of a general introduction to 3CX and PBXs in general. There are always a couple of points that some installers are just not following, however, which are meant to be followed. We see these things exactly in the moment now when we are moving from version 18 to version 20, and we are covered with certain questions where which in some ways sometimes are not necessary, simply if everything is properly set up and planned from the beginning. Therefore, we go to the next slide, which is meant plan ahead. Plan the system so that it withstands the test of time as good as possible. Of course, this is not in any case possible, but on a general level, you will be able to plan the system, especially with virtual machines, so that the system becomes upgradable on a specification level over multiple years. We have to understand if we run a 3CX, which is a software PBX, which is virtual in the end, on a physical hardware, if we use the smallest specs that we can use in terms of mainboard and whatever, we restrict ourselves and we restrict our customer from future upgrades, from future growing possibilities. The difference between such a system of 3CX is to a traditional bare metal PBX machine that is literally mounted on a wall or into a rack somewhere, is the 3CX is floating on top of the hardware. It is upgradable by licensing. We can upgrade it by the amount of simultaneous calls. We have an unlimited amount of extensions that we can add to it, which means the system can literally grow indefinitely, which means we have to provide the carpet where the system can be deployed for as long as possible. I had once a customer, he had a system deployed on a Dell Xenon server, a massive device that he hung into a rack, and I just thought, okay, for those 20 users that you have here, this is a little bit too rich, this is a little bit too much, but then what do we know how that company looks like in 5 years? Companies can grow immediately to a massive amount of employees. We saw that over the last decades with multiple companies that started in a garage and ended up massive, as huge companies. And 3CX is literally a system where you can upgrade without having to change the physical PBX, because you just add a more simultaneous calls to it and all that stuff. So if you choose a system that is just limited in the capacity, then you cause issues for yourself and your customer in a long-term run. Yeah. Next point I would like to address in that regard with the capacity, we had people complaining about that they had to update the system or go to a bigger virtual machine because 3CX uses too much specs. Now, it's not 3CX, it's Debian 12. It's the operating system it runs on. It's not 3CX themselves. And 3CX chose Debian 12 in that way to have for a longer time now a operating system that is not going to be changed. I mean, of course, this will change again in a couple of years. But if they would have gone to Debian 11, they would have had to change to Debian 12 earlier down the path. This is why 3CX now chose Debian 12 and jump over Debian 11. Yeah. Then also have an emergency plan ready for whatever comes when outage is happening or any form of issues that you can have in the future. Plan ahead. Again, add redundancy, spare capacity to the system. Don't try to outsmart the system. Don't think that you know the system better than the ones who actually do it and start fiddling around, especially to the people who work on the Linux back end and think they can do something just on Debian. Don't do it. It's not worth it. You end up most likely further down the track with having issues on the system that you tried to outsmart. And then also know your limits. Stick to what you can. If you can't, or if you are not good in Linux, then use Windows. If you don't know Windows, use Linux. So from that perspective, yeah. Ron, just throw a question into the questions part if you have a question, or into the chat. That's okay if you have a question. Next point. It's interesting, that next point. Backups. I was just attending the advanced training in Melbourne down here that 3CX presented, and Nick said the same stuff. Backups. Use backups. Yeah, you can't have enough backups. It's as simple as that. Backups usually are taken when you log into a system. That's the first thing you do when you log into a system. Doesn't matter if it's a system that is new to you, so something that you inherit from someone, or it is a system that you maintain for a longer period. The first thing you do when you log into a PBX, you take a backup. That gives you the security that if you mess up something further down the track, you have the initial backup on how the system was when you started touching it. When you do longer work on a system, you do backups during your work. Imagine you have to do multiple changes on a system and at some point you realize you messed something up. If you don't have an initial backup, you can't even properly go back to the system where you started. If you didn't do sequential backups during the maintenance work, if you have done half an hour of work on the system, you have to literally upload the initial backup and you have to redo your work all from scratch. If you do sequential backups, you can go back to there where you started to mess up, and you don't have to do the whole work again. You do a backup once you finished your work on a system. This gives you the security that the backup or that the system is backed up on its latest status from what you have done. I've come across my time in telecommunications multiple times to the issue that you did some work, customer asked you to do some work, customer comes in the end when you're finished and points the finger at you and says, this is not the same anymore like we used to have. This used to work like that prior. Easy fix. You take the initial backup, upload that and say, look, that's now the system how I started it today. It is the same like you have it after my work. Yeah. And then you replay the backup with the end situation on after you finished your work. Yeah. It's people always stipulate something into, especially on a phone system, into a phone system or into something when someone touched it. PBXs are still a holy cow in terms for the customer. It's easier to mess up a mail server because then they have peace and freedom. They don't get spammed with emails. They reward you. But if you mess up their phone system, they would like to shoot you up to the moon. It's still the same. And this will be the same for next couple of decades. It's completely different if you touch one of their mail servers or what else ever, or you touch their phone system. Phone systems are still an absolute essential part of nowadays business. Then again, backup, establish a backup routine, place the backup either on the device if you have enough space, or that can be done on FTP, SFTP, Google Bucket, wherever. And of course, do also backups before updating or before you make hardware changes. Infrastructure. Use business-grade hardware. Do not use do-it-yourself hardware. Do-it-yourself hardware in that regard are those cheapish routers that you get from your ISP when he literally sends you or your customer the device for their new internet access. Devices like these who cannot have port forwarding established or other things that are required for business grade communication. Also ensure that the systems are deployed based on the recommendations, maintain the infrastructure, and again, plan ahead that the systems are upgradable. Updates, always again a very, very daunting part from our end when we see that people just wildly click on update system without actually looking what they do. Plan an update. Do not just apply them. This is a live system, a productive system. Your customer uses it. Do not cut them down by just say, oh yeah, I do an update now, it's an update necessary. Yeah. Make sure that the deployment, the existing deployment will survive the update. Read the changelog. Read what has changed in the update. Yeah? It is your necessity, it is your job to stay at top of what is changing on the system, what is not changing, what is not possible anymore, what will come. It is your job to do it. That's with all phone systems. That's not only with 3CX. Yeah. Do not update as soon as an update is available. Especially not major updates. Make sure that you monitor the message boards closely on whatever kind of bugs that are around and all that stuff. Imagine a year ago, literally a year ago, 3CX had a security breach. Yeah, you remember with the Electron app, the desktop app that had a security breach. Everyone who did not update the system immediately was fine. Everyone who updated with automatic updates had that thing on his user's desktop app. Yeah. So please do not automatic updates. Do not enable them, and maintain your systems on a manual level. Takes a little bit of work, but it can save you a lot of issues further down the track. And also do not install alpha or beta version on productive deployments. We have seen that multiple times that people click on that update now when you have a beta version lined out in the update section. I get the point that 3CX lines that out as saying your version is out of date. I am not happy with that since ever, but you also have to read what you do. Yeah. So if you have a beta version and it's lined out that it's a beta version there in the update section, do not apply it, please. Except you have a test environment where you want to test around and play around, feel free to do it there, but you don't apply beta versions on productive systems. Quick housekeeping to this training session here. This is a technical training. Please ask questions after every chapter, not during the presentation. I am alone here. I am monitoring the chat myself, so I have no opportunity to look into the questions while I am actually looking at the slides and talk. I'm also not 100% well at the moment, carrying something around with me for the last 1.5 weeks. It's not COVID, definitely not, but it's just a nasty cold. Do not ask questions related to issues in current installs. I am not going to answer these kind of questions. This is what our help desk is for. It's not the training. People who attend the training do not want to know what issues you have or your customer have. Most questions will be answered during each section anyway. I also will not jump into discussions about stun. Stun is still working with 3CX. There's a guide on the internet where how you can use stun, but generally stun is a technology that causes just too many issues, and 3CX has options, gives you options to avoid stun. So from that perspective, we are not looking into stun. Again, please contact help@breezeconnect.com.au for live issues, and use the 3CX message board for ideas, feature requests. If we go to 3CX with ideas and feature requests that you place on our end, it is one voice that goes to 3CX. If you go to the message board and place them there, it's multiple voices. And also there, we saw that over the last couple of months, be polite with how you discuss with 3CX. We have seen people being removed because of not being really polite or using whatever kind of things. Yeah, just to give you a hint in that regard, there have been big partners removed because employees of them went to the 3CX board and said, what, yeah, crap, and the developers are smoking something and all that stuff. And often a lot of these things happened like half a year already before the final release was of version 20 was done. So at a time when it was not even relevant to give a rant out. Okay, so just for that That's literally the introduction. Keep that in mind.